So the other things which we then talked a little bit about is cartels, okay? And in many ways, you could think of a cartel in a very similar fashion to the prisoner's dilemma. Think of this mind experiment. Suppose that you're OPEC, right? You've got a number of member countries, including Saudi Arabia is one, and a bunch of other Middle Eastern countries. I can't remember them all, so please forgive me. And they basically control a large chunk of the oil market. So if you think about it, oil is a fairly homogeneous commodity, right? It's not something that's heterogeneous per se. Again, I'm sure there's a petroleum engineering student that'll correct me on that. But let's just take it as a homogeneous good. If, for example, they say that, okay, we all agree to sell oil at $70 a barrel, right? But then basically they'd have to then split the market, right? Whatever the profit they earn, they would then have to split it according to its member countries. But think about it, the incentives from one of the member countries' perspective. If they decide to say, okay, if I were to reduce it to $69 a barrel, right, what would happen? US consumers of oil would then say, okay, I'm going to purchase it all from that particular country because it's marginally cheaper. So, of course, in this particular scenario, assuming that the price is above marginal cost, that particular country will benefit a hell of a lot more. So the actual payoff is a lot larger, right? So from that perspective, right, grabbing the whole market share is very, very tempting. And that is basically the temptation, right? So there is an incentive for them to actually deviate. But in equilibrium, of course, everyone would actually deviate. But why doesn't it actually work in this particular case? Because they've come to some sort of private agreement. And to analyze why they actually don't deviate would require a little more analysis in a second year course called game theory. Okay? And from that, we talk about things such as punishments and repeated interactions. And that's one of the reasons why they don't necessarily deviate. Okay? So then there's the coordination game, which we basically talked about. The game which I've kind of described before is what they call the battle of the sexes. Okay? So for the prisoner's dilemma game, one of the key things which I really want you to note is that the payoff that they first receive depends on the action of its competitors. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that the actual outcome, the actual equilibrium outcome is inefficient, right? And for the coordination game of the prisoner's dilemma, there are multiple equilibria, okay? And that, again, is a bit of a contrast to the perfectly competitive market, because in a perfectly competitive market, under the very neat assumptions we have, you only have one particular outcome. Here, with the coordination game, you have two outcomes. So that is also worth noting. So hopefully that is relatively clear. And most importantly, keep up with the posts. Georgia and I and Ashley will be basically trawling through it. It takes time, so please be patient with us. And if you have any questions, or if there's any concepts you want me to clarify next week, then please post them and I will do my best to simplify them for you. So take care, and I'll see you all next week.